Hey, Planeswalkers, Mythras here. Hope you're doing well and staying safe. Today is a glorious day. I love doing these episodes for you. It is a culmination of work, typically over the course of a couple months. In this case, a couple weeks after the recent bannings that have happened, which we'll touch on here in a moment. But I absolutely love doing this for you. And what is that I speak of? We are producing a tier list for you today. For those of you that don't know what a tier list is in terms of gaming or elements of video games / in this case, we got a trading card game that's also in paper, but obviously none of us have unfortunately been able to play a lot of that recently. We do a subjective ranking at a competitive level, so high-level competitive setting in which a deck is going to perform better than another deck. And the way I do it specifically is I do a ranked tiered system that's 1, 2, 3. There sometimes are letter-oriented ones or a 0.5 kind of deal as well. So I try to do my best to group the decks in terms of a 1, 2, 3 grouping, and I will talk through some of that reasoning as we get there. Now, I am so excited because it's been about 2.5 weeks since the recent bannings. We lost the Cat Oven, we lost the Reclamation, so Temur Rec and a few other things. We lost Growth Spiral, so it really hurt the ramp decks, and then we also lost everyone's favorite Teferi. May he rest in peace. Anyway, with that said, my friends, it has definitely made some big changes. So very excited to go back over this tier list for you and talk about those things. So what's going to happen today is, number one, we're going to go ahead and take a look at that tier list. Number two, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the shift in the meta, some of the changes that we've seen, and then also the comparison slightly of month over month, because I think it's going to be important, and I want to talk through some of those decisions with you today as well. And then lastly, I will dive into each of those decks at a high level, cover off on some of that strategy, but please be aware you will have obviously access to the deeper dive of each of those decks, the deck lists, as well as gameplay and some of the strategy guides, sideboarding options, and those things. And today's episode is all about the best of one, so I want to make sure that you're aware of that as well. Now, quickly here before we go check out the tier list, please don't forget to subscribe down over there. Appreciate it. Appreciate the support. You can like the video, like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Twitch as well to stay up to date. Additionally, that will keep you in the loop for when I do the next tier list, as well as produce a lot of the deck content, guides, gameplay, competitive stuff, all for you. So before we go ahead and take a look at this tier list, one final thought here. This is a culmination of effort, specifically over the last couple of months, but also in the near term in terms of the last couple of bannings. It's very important that we have this continuity month over month, or even longer, as we try and assess the meta, the changes, and the quick competitive nature that we now find in Magic the Gathering Arena. All right, without further ado, my friends, here is the deck list. I have gruesomely put it into perspective for you. I will walk through each of these decks here in a moment. And if you're looking for another avenue of format, the list is available for you down below in the description, as always. So if you've already beat me to the punch there, I wanted to make sure that you actively listened first before you just jumped right down there. But they are all listed down below. There are links to all the videos that cover all these decks for you. You also will have all the deck lists right away, so you can absolutely get started there. All right, so what do we have going on in our tier 1? We have Rakdos Sac still. We have Mono Green Stompy. We now have Temur Clover. We also now have Sultai Ramp. We have at tier 2 Mono Red, Mono White, Mono Black. We have a Mardu Winota Sac. We have an Izzet Spells deck, a Mardu Knights, a Dimir Flash, Azorius Fliers, Boros Houndmaster, Winota deck, whatever you want to call it, a Rakdos Knights, a Gruul Aggro, Temur Yorion. We also now have a Jeskai / Boros Cycling. We have Mono Red Cavalcade. And now moving into our tier 3, we have Sultai Midrange, Grixis Midrange, Simic Adventures, Temur Flash, Simic Ramp, Simic Flash, Orzhov Yorion, Azorius Yorion, and that rounds it out. So the first thing that I want to talk about here is there are definitely over 25 decks. So this is also a good shift in terms of the meta. I think previously it was a lot more narrow. The options weren't quite as many. I will say in discussions with many of you out there, there were some that we could have included or those kinds of things, but I did not want it to be as broad. I do feel in terms of the current meta, it is a little bit more broader. So I do think that's important. One that is still kind of a point of it being, I don't want to say relatively new because I think this is pretty defined, but still coming out of only a couple weeks, we've seen a plethora of decks for us to take a look at, play, assess, and go after it. Additionally, all these decks are updated with all the current bans so that they are also been played through to help kind of assess and sort these things out. So one of the other things that I do want to call out here in terms of this list is what's very important is month over month. What we found last month is not the same as this month, obviously because of the bans, but what I find to be very interesting is a shift from the monocolors away towards the multicolor and slightly late gamey type decks. We see Temur Clover moving back up into the ranks. This was something I speculated on very early, probably day one actually after the banning, so you guys can take a look at that. It's obviously a tier 1 deck, top performer again. The next one that we saw here is Sultai Ramp. So this one was really, I think I had it listed as a tier 3 last time round. It wasn't quite as powerful. It is definitely shifted. I will say though, this one to me, if I had to go 0.5, I would actually go 0.5, 1.5 in best of 1. However, I felt it was strong enough to be in the tier 1 for a couple of reasons. One, I know it is heavily favored and heavily played right now in best of 3, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a great best of 1 deck. It still is a very, very powerful best of 1 deck, but you can still outspeed it with a lot of different play styles like mono red, those kinds of things. And that will tie me into the mono red deck here. I did move mono red from tier 1 to tier 2 for a couple of reasons. One, in my opinion, because of the vast, slightly more broader deck list here, it does tend to slightly lose its way, even though it's still a phenomenal deck. I play a ton of mono red still in the top 1500, but it's not as consistent, I'll say, as it used to be. And again, I would put this one into a 0.5. However, again, based off my play, based off what I've seen, I feel more strongly this is kind of a tier 2 deck. So with that said, the other thing is I have now reduced mono whites into tier 2 as well. I think I had that one as a tier 1. But again, we now have a ton of other decks. Something I do want to call out is a lot of the decks that were strong pre-Companion during Eldraine or Throne of Eldraine are starting to make that shift back. We see things like Jeskai, Boros cycling as a very viable deck. My Mardu Knights deck has become very strong again. Some things like Izzet Spells have become stronger because of the absence of Teferi, those kinds of things. We do see more mid-range type decks coming up. To me, they are still just not quite as strong. The strongest of those is still going to be the Gruul Aggro one. And I have added in a Azorius Fliers deck. Definitely a strong tier 2 deck. Lots of good things that can happen there as well. The other call out here is Yorion Elementals. To me was a tier 3 deck. Now it is definitely a tier 2. It has gotten stronger again with the changes in the meta. So questions, comments, please feel free to ask me down below. All the listed decks are down below for you. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, assessing it, playing in the top 1500 most of this season so far, and definitely seen a lot of these shifts in action, and it can be a day over day thing. The other thing that I do want to just say about Sultai Ramp, one of the reasons why I did put it here, is out of the gate in best of 1, it definitely had a really high win percentage from what I've seen and collected in information, which is one of the reasons why I did lean towards that T1. even though, again, with that caveat on the best of 3 side, that it may not necessarily impact the best of 1 as much. So hope you enjoyed it. Again, list is down below. Check out the videos. If you got questions, comments, want to debate, let me know, Planeswalkers. I always love taking a look at these things with you. And from that, we've now looked at the list. We've talked about some of the differences, the shifts in the meta, the ramp. The one other thing that I do want to call out there is in terms of the ramp, we did have Simic growth. We had Simic Ramp, Bant Ramp, and Sultai Ramp. And oddly enough, what I'll say, of the 3, I thought Sultai was probably potentially the weakest, and now it has become the strongest with all the changes. So pretty interesting to see that. I think it's pretty powerful. Obviously, all the reclamation decks are done. The other piece that we see here is Jund is not really a thing. The original Rakdos Sac is still there, with caveat and some changes. It is still very strong, but it is not in a league of its own, I'll just say, anymore, because I did hear many people say that is Rakdos Sac is in a league of its own. It's definitely not in a league of its own anymore. So that will round out kind of the discussion piece, some of the key pointers and observations for us. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a look into each of these decks at a high level. You can absolutely feel free to jump down, take a look at the deck list, like I said, and blow it out. So before I go through and start looking at the decks, just want to do a friendly reminder again and just say thank you so much for your support, your feedback. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel down over there. You can like the video if you're enjoying it. Please feel free to like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Twitch to stay up to date as well. All right, Planeswalkers, let's dive into it. We got a lot of decks to get through. I'm going to try and go through this relatively quickly for you so that we can make this a much, much faster process. I'm going to move myself down here. So what do we got going on with Rakdos Sac? What's the biggest change? Maybe that's where I'll kind of focus. But this one, again, was a Croaky's deck, actually hitting #1 with it. Early on into the season. Biggest pieces, obviously Lurrus is gone. We also have Lost Cat Oven. This is an updated list that still performs well. We see Weaponize the monsters in here. This is a great option for you and a very fun piece. We also, again, retain Village Rights, which makes a big difference. Now, one of the other things that I do see here, we have Liliana's Standard Bearer, but one of the other things that you do run into once in a while with the Sac decks is Judith. Judith has also made this deck very powerful. Here's the sideboard for you in best of 3 as well. You can go ahead and check out the video if you got questions, but these are the key components. We also, again, still have our lovely Croxa, and we have Fiend Artisan. All right, on to the next deck for us. Mono Green Stompy. So this one also was already a top performer in my book. Same with last tier video. I think it has absolutely stayed strong. It did not get hurt in the bannings, so therefore, again, we get to keep it here. Lots of viability, lots of things, again, to protect us against Graveyard. Maybe the biggest changer here, depending on the list that you run, would be Growth Chamber Guardian. Again, this particular list, I believe, was #1 at one point. I think it was by Rumpty. And here is the sideboard for you for best of 3 options. Again, you can check these out later in the other videos. All right, Temur Clover, my friends. This was a big one. Aaron Gertler, probably butchered that, was a big pilot of this originally back in Throne of Eldraine. Made a big comeback. Again, recently, one of the decks that I was speculating on, definitely fear this in the meta. Lots can happen, lots of big plays, and obviously this list for your tier 1 for best of 1 and best of 3 is pretty much the same, so not much difference there. This is a little bit of a different list because we are running Aether Gust and 2 Escape to the Wilds. It also runs Nissa, so a little bit more updated for the meta that we have currently going on. Again, here is the sideboard for us with lots of different options that we can play in our best of 1 matches or even best of 3. All right, next we have Sultai Ramp. So this is the big newcomer into our lovely, lovely tier list, at least to number 1, coming from number 3. Again, nothing happens until turn 2, but we have so many different things that we can do. We have the ability to gain life back. We got that ramp, we got exile, we got Nissa, we got casualties of war. So many options. Now, the thing though is it's not a fast deck. It can protect itself well, but again, you still got to get there. There's ways to evade. There's a lot of different things that you can do. And I, again, would speculate, and I think you guys can check out some of my videos here, that we may see a increase in Simic Flash. It definitely takes down the Sultai decks fairly, I don't want to say easily, but it does become a very favorable matchup. Now, next we have some of the sideboard options here again. You can feel free to find the video down below to discuss. All right, Mono Red Aggro. So this deck I have played heavily over the last few seasons. It is definitely going to get hurt when we do hit our lovely great rotation coming up here. It's still going to have some options, but we're going to lose a lot of key components like Light Up the Stage and Runaway that will hurt the deck. So hopefully the new set, Zendikar Rising, is going to have a great fill-in for some of these to keep Mono Red a viable option. But this is a wonderful deck. Definitely has helped me stay in top 1500. I've hit the Mythic Qualifier off this. And have also maintained just playing with this one. Great fast matches, healthy win rates, month over month. Next, here's the sideboard again. Like I said, this was a struggle for me. I could see this being a tier 1 deck, and I could also see this Sultai Ramp being a tier 2, not necessarily a tier 1. So this was a really hard choice for me, especially since I love Mono Red too. Next, Mono White. Many of you know this was the deck last season that got me into Mythic. I'm a huge fan of this deck. I do think it got slightly worse with the banning for a couple of reasons. Just the shift in the meta again. I think there's just more answers at a broad perspective. Obviously, that can be seen from the decks that we'll take a look at. But this is still a wonderful option. I love playing this deck, and has played really well for me still in the current season after the bannings. Here's the sideboard again with a couple different options, and obviously down below you can find the deep dive. Next we got Mono Black. So again, this one for me was a tier 2. This was a tough decision last season. I think it was a little bit easier this season for me. It's a wonderful deck, a very powerful deck. Was number 1 early on last season. I think it's very strong still. Again, it's just the breadth of the meta. I don't feel it performs as well necessarily. And here's the sideboard for us that we can take a look at. And if you got questions about any of these, like I say, please feel free to ask. Next, we have our Mardu Winota Sacrifice deck. So this became a big newcomer towards the end of last season. It became more powerful right after bannings, absolutely. This deck has a ton of options and a lot of things it can do. I think you'll find it to be a very fun deck to pilot and play. I really enjoyed this one. We also have a wonderful sideboard here for our best of 3. All right, next we have Izzet Spells. So Izzet Spells to me, I think was originally a tier 3. It became stronger just purely because of Teffi, to be honest. But with that said, we just have lots of options here and things that we can do and play around our opponents, those kinds of things. That makes this deck very powerful and a wonderful aggro-y type deck as well. We have great options. Dreadhorde Arcanist is awesome. The ability to bring a lot of these spells back and do something is very impressive and really helpful. The lovely Sprite Dragon is just a great card. And then Stormwing Entity is phenomenal for ensuring a nice, smooth hand with the scry, and then the ability to pop this on a turn 3 and get a 3/3 flyer with prowess is absolutely amazing. Again, sideboard for you. All right, on to our next tier 2 deck. So this Mardu Knights deck was my particular Mardu Knights deck that I crafted for us and got me in the top 500 last season. Pretty amazing. I really enjoy this deck. It is very powerful now still. I run Chance for Glory. I really enjoy that. It makes things totally different. And a lot of people just don't see it coming, but you can absolutely T3, T4 them kind of a deal, which is awesome, by the way. So next we have the sideboard for you if you want to go down the best of 3 route. Now, I will definitely say a lot of these decks, especially with the changes, I wanted to go back and assess a lot of the things that were strongly played, but not as strong anymore in terms of people playing them with the deck list. So I did craft a lot of my own lists and brew, so I'm very proud of those, especially because they were all great matches in the top 1500 that I was able to play with them and play well. Next, we got a Dimir Flash one. This one's really focused more so on the mutate. This is one of Covert Go Blue lists from a while back. Still a great list, a viable option. There are, again, different views and takes on the Dimir Flash. This one, I think, is still a great one. It's a lot more fun, in my opinion. As I love the shark and I love the Dirge Bat here. So just a fun thing. So thank you, Covert, on those. Again, some great sideboard spells for you in the case that you want to play best of 3. Next, T2. So this was a big discussion one last time for me. I didn't include it, but it's definitely in this time. Azorius Fliers. This was a #1 ranked deck early on last season, I believe. It is still a very powerful deck. Lots of things that can happen here. Lots of things we can do. It runs very well still in current meta. Yes, there are things that can clear it off the board, but again, it's a very powerful list, especially in the best of 1 realm. Ooh. And quickly here, forgot to show you the sideboard should you choose to play some best of 3 with it as well. Lots of good options. Uh-oh, except Teffy. Sorry, I need to get a little bit better one there. Sideboard, so best of 1, the main board's still fine. All right, Boros Houndmaster. This one's made a big comeback. I've played this one quite a bit again. Here, definitely a tier 2 list. I would maybe borderline say this could be a tier 3 deck, at least in the current meta, but it is absolutely a wonderful deck. The Season Pawblade edition here is very powerful, and obviously Winota is something else, and we still get access to Embercleave. Here is the sideboard list as well. Next, I'm going to run out of breath here for you guys. Next we have Rakdos Knights. So this deck, very powerful. Again, I think you've heard me say this before. Was a very strong deck earlier this year, late last year. Played it a bunch in Mythic. Actually, I think it helped me hit Mythic. Very powerful once again. We now see Kitesail Freebrooder in here. Another deck that wasn't touched by the bannings that also just helps make it a little bit stronger when it was already a very powerful deck. And the sideboard for you here. All right, next we have a Gruul Aggro mid-range type deck. I really enjoyed this list. One, we got Garruk, which is super fun, and we got access to Rata, Heart of Keld, which does a ton of stuff, and we're very strong in the 2 slot as well as with some removal, but the addition of Terror Peaks is such an awesome card too. I love playing this one. So many opportunities with this to blow out a board or to blow out our opponents. Next, here's the sideboard for this particular one as well. Lots of good matchups there. Next, Temur Elementals. So this one now ramps into Ugin. It slightly did last last season as well. I think it's a little bit more solidified. Genesis Ultimatum's a key component. It definitely has gotten much stronger, in my opinion, with the meta changes and just the way that the deck list has been pulled together. Additionally, we see Terror of the Peaks. This is a very powerful list. This one hit number 1 at one point again during this season. And here's the sideboard for you. I had this at tier 3 last time. This now is a tier 2 deck, absolutely. Next, this one's a very fun deck. A slightly different take, an older take on cycling. This one is actually Jeskai. You'll see the Boros more often than not now. But one of the things that I wanted to present in this one that I still enjoy over just the generic cycling Boros one is the access to blue mana for things like Ominous Seas and Improbable Alliance, just giving you some additional options on the board to do some very, very powerful things that your opponents may not see coming and are going to be very, very helpful. Additionally, the access to a cycle land is always nice. That is something else that you could throw in there on the other deck lists as well. And here's the sideboard for you for best of 3, mainly again to do and deal with direct things, not necessarily on the cycle side. All right, Planeswalkers, there we have it. Now, the other thing is you could definitely put in more Flourishing Foxes here too. That one's done. Next, to round out our final tier 2 deck, we have included a mono red Cavalcade. So this was a highly debated one last season for me. I think I had it at tier 1, tier 2. It's definitely tier 2 now. This particular list is really strong. It leverages things like Heartfire, a little bit different, but it's got great synergies with Grim Initiative or Grim Initiate and Forbidden Friendship. And again, here's the sideboard for you. I love the Cavalcade decks. They're fast matches, just like mono red, very powerful and very viable options in current meta. All right, so that concludes our tier 2 list. Now we're going to move in and take a look at our tier 3. We have a Sultai Midrange deck. So this one was a great deck, super fun early on this season, hit number 1. I think to me, if you were to ask, this was really the predecessor and the beginnings of the rise of the Sultai. Even though I have it at tier 3 here, I really like this deck. Primarily, though, in best of 1, it's just not as strong. We don't have as much, in my opinion, great game-winning clenching type moves. We definitely can make it more grindy. We can definitely move it from mid-game to late game, but that is one of the reasons why I have it in tier 3. Again, lots of great options, though, in the sideboard here. Next, we have a Grixis Midrange deck. So this deck is very powerful. Hit top 5, top 10, I think, at one point during the season. I really like this. Again, I think it's just a little slow for best of 1, but we have a lot of powerful stuff at the tier 2. We get access to a lot of powerful planeswalkers, so if we can get there, you're really not going to have to worry in terms of closing the game, because these ones at the high end definitely can do that for you. Here's the sideboard again with options. Next, we have Simic Adventures. So this was kind of a newcomer. Did very well early season, got high up on the list, quickly got through a lot of matches. A couple callouts here. I really enjoyed the deck. I was close to putting this one in tier 2. I still feel like it's a tier 3. It's just not, in my opinion, super strong out the gate. Yes, you get a lot of engines going, but you need those engines. And we could always strengthen it, but I do like Thassa's Oracle in here as an alternative win condition. Here's the sideboard for you again. All right. Next, we have one of my favorite decks so far. I really enjoy Temur Flash. I have a lot of fun with this deck. Again, unfortunately, it's just not super strong in best of 1. It's a little too slow. We do get some decent options, but to me, it's fighting too many things in the best of 1. Again, that tier list, especially in the 2 spot, tier 2 is very powerful with a broad range of options. I just feel like this list can be a little bit too generic, unfortunately, so you're going to be holding a little bit more dead cards than you'd like. Here's the great sideboard again for best of 3 as well. Next, we have Simic Ramp. So this was another one that I pulled together. Really enjoyed doing this. It ran very powerfully for me. This particular list, as I mentioned in the video you should go check out, is really focused on that ramp. I've done something a little bit unique with Leyline of Abundance. Ideally, and essentially, you could actually turn 4 Ugin, but you're going to need a great draw. So again, we see the removal of growth definitely really hurt the ramp decks. This one's still going to survive. Ramp's pretty much dead as far as I'm concerned. I think everyone else is. Here's the sideboard for you too. And on to our next deck here. So this was another one that I pulled together. This was a Simic Flash deck. I had a ton of fun playing this. This to me is the meta breaker to some extent with Sultai. You run this bad boy, you're going to be pretty fine. It's optimized slightly, and I say slightly for best of 1 because of the front end stuff here to help you. You could always put in the elf 2/2 flash creature with reach. That would really strengthen this, but my whole focus here was to really go on the counters and again not get top heavy above 4. And you can definitely go check out the video on why I did that. But I did hit top 300 with this deck, so something to keep in mind. Again, here's the sideboard optimized for both aggro as well as other late game options for you. Next, we have Orzhov Yorion. So we've seen this come back quite a bit. I see it played a lot. It's definitely a tier 3 list. Again, just going 80 cards doesn't make it real consistent. We do see Esper versions, which are fun as well. But this deck really focus on, or rats, discard, whatever you want to call it, really about pinning down your opponent and taxing them for a slow death. And it is pretty painful. And then here's some sideboard options for you. Kaya's Wrath is always, at least in best of 1, always a good main board option for you. All right. Last but not least, Azorius Yorion Control. So this was another deck that I put together. Ran great, definitely a top 1,000 deck for me, top 1,500, whatever you want to call it. Ran really well. I enjoy it. You can go check out that video as well to understand a little bit more of my thought process, but at a high level, really focused around Arch and Sun's Grace, leveraging our enchantments, and then having the control that we need when we need to. And then in terms of the sideboard, really flipping in the control there. So there you have it. I think that covers all 25, 26 decks that we have. It is a lovely list. It is an extensive list. It is an exhaustive list. I think you can't necessarily go wrong with some of these decks in here. It's also a personal preference and play style. My goal was to provide you a competitive take, competitive look based off my experience, based off all the stuff that I've seen, based off statistics, based off research, to compile this list to make it easier for you to hopefully help make certain decisions, or if you want to try something new or get your feet wet prior to the great rotation we got coming up, this is a great place to start. So Planeswalkers, again, the list is available down below for you. Questions, comments, please ask. I am here to help. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel down over there. Again, I appreciate that support. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Also, feel free to like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Twitch to stay up to date on awesome content like this. As I've said, I absolutely love pulling together these lists for you. And for me, it's a very natural thing after having played all these decks. Additionally, staying competitive, staying on the top, and hopefully on the cutting edge for you to help provide insights. And obviously, give me feedback. What works, what doesn't work. I love hearing that, what you think of the deck list, what I can do better. I'm here for you. So Planeswalkers, with that said, I want to thank you so much. Please stay safe out there, and I will see you again soon. And stay tuned for more awesome decks coming your way and for awesome tier lists. Mythras out. We'll see you again soon, Planeswalkers.